all the WARGREYMONs and subspecies in the Digimon TCG. Starting things off from the very beginning, Starter Deck 1 WARGREYMON. This card, when it came out in the Gaia Force Starter Deck in 2020, was, it was the early stages of the game. We didn't know how the cards would advance, but right from the get-go, it is seemingly strong. The unfortunate thing is it does cost 4 to evolve on a level 5, which back then you would usually cross over memory unless you played something like Gravity Crush, which was done back then. But more times than not, you did cross over memory, unless your opponent was very generous. Its effect is your turn for every 2 Digivolution cards in its source, it gains security attack +1. And this was before the whole X Anybody archetype, so you wouldn't be able to have that multiple evolution sources underneath and get maybe 5 clean checks like you might nowadays. So back then, it had good utility. It could swing for maybe like 2-3 security checks. And it was 12k, and usually we have a boost from like the starter deck Greymon, which would give security attack +1, or even like the Bt1-Greymon that would give 2k boost and stuff like that. So it would be pretty strong for its meta, but it got power crept, of course. Even now, some people do find utility with this card. It just lacks some of the protection, but you can always have a Greymon X underneath to keep it from dying when swinging at security. So it's a nice little tech. It's a nice card. Even in today's day and age, I can see this card still being implemented. So it still holds up as a quality WARGREYMON card. There are definitely better cards, but it's definitely not a bad one. Next up is the classic Bt1 WARGREYMON. This card has stood the test of time in many metas for the Greymon tribal archetype. This is honestly probably my favorite WARGREYMON card. Personal preferences aside, it's still just an amazing, fantastic card. Of course, the alt art is just fantastic. Even the main art was great, but even the Asmaria and the other ones are great as well. Its effect: when digivolving, it gains security attack +1. So this Digimon checks 1 additional card for the turn, and that would of course carry up into whatever it evolved into, whether it was in BT9 meta WARGREYMON X, or even if you went into BT5 Bt17, that security attack would carry over, and that would usually secure you game. This card is for the OTK strategy, or if you were going against security control or something that was nasty with security options, because it does shut them down. Because your turn, this Digimon doesn't activate security skills on option cards it checks. So more times than not, you're going to have your starter deck Greymon with extra security check. In recent meta times, you're going to have Metal Greymon X for another security check, and your BT1 tie giving it another security check. So more times than not, the combo is swinging for 5 clean checks with BT1 WARGREYMON, usually with high DP numbers with the Metal Greymon X, or boost from the BT12 ties and things like that. So it will have usually safe sailing through security, and then you just with BT5 Omnimon full game. So this card is definitely A tier in my opinion. Classic, amazing card. Next up, we have little BT2 black colored WARGREYMON, not to be confused of course with black WARGREYMON. I remember when this card came out, the black WARGREYMON. This isn't black WARGREYMON, or the memes of we have black WARGREYMON at home and it would be this card, but not the black WARGREYMON everyone loves. But anyways, side note, this Asmaria art is such fire. This is actually one of my favorite artworks in the whole game. Too bad it's on this card. With this card, it's okay. It didn't really work too well with the whole blocker strategy back when the BT2 meta came out. It was cool, but it's a decent card for what it is. Definitely not super competitive nowadays. It got power crept, of course, by BT12 WARGREYMON, and the fact that it was black, so it could only evolve from a black level 5, and we didn't have really good black metal Greymons at that time, outside of the ones that came out in BT2, but that archetype at the time wasn't as strong. There's utility for it potentially with the starter deck in October, but as of right now, it's not really used. It's a blocker inherently, and it has reboot, so depending on what inheritables you put underneath of it, it could be useful. I'm not going to completely shut it down because it is still a good card. Having that reboot, if you paired it with the Metal Greymon X from BT11, you could always trash security when you reboot. Having a strong blocker, especially if you have the BT12 ties on the field, could also boost it up as a strong blocker on your opponent's turn. So it's not a bad card inherently, it just of course got power crept. But yeah, it's still a decent WARGREYMON to utilize in some niche strategies, so I'm not going to completely discredit it. And now we have, still in the BT2 meta, Black WARGREYMON. Like I said, the Black WARGREYMON that you wanted, but you ended up getting was the WARGREYMON that's black. This one, when it came out, I remember people were like, oh, Black WARGREYMON got a card. Its attack when attacking is pretty cool. If you attack your opponent's Digimon with the highest DP, you can unsuspend him. So if you have, if he's boosted up with high DP and he swings into, at the time it would have been a suspended Digimon because you couldn't really raid or attack unsuspended Digimon with the BT8 Metal Greymon yet. So you could just keep going down their line on the field swinging with this Black WARGREYMON, which was pretty cool. It's also kind of, it's niche. It's on play effect of while your opponent has a Digimon with 10,000 DP or more in play, you can reduce the memory cost of this card by 6, so you could just hard play it and reduce cost. So that can come up sometimes. My buddy Slightly does play this card in his kind of like Megazoo Gaiomon deck, so I can see its utility even in the BT12 to EX4 meta. But the card just isn't as good as other Black WARGREYMONs in the game, but it's still cool, and of course this artwork is phenomenal, especially when you pair it with the BT1 WARGREYMON with, not so much but the one with the lightning in the back, the same artwork, but you get the other one. It's a cool card. It's just low on the totem pole as far as the WARGREYMON, Black WARGREYMON cards go. Next is Promo Black WARGREYMON that came out around the same time as BT2, BT3. It's honestly, this card is amazing. Like, for such a, just like the BT1 WARGREYMON, this card has such utility, especially in a Greymon tribal archetype that has so many evolution sources and security checks, because it's simple. Main effect is Digiburst 2. You would trash 2 cards from its evolution source to unsuspend this Digimon. So you just would take the 2 cards out from, and as long as you kept your security started at Greymon underneath, you would restand and swing, and chances are it's going to be boosted up with high DP. And of course you could play things like a Delicate Plan and other things like Yuya to protect it from swinging into security, so you can OTK your opponent very easily with this Black WARGREYMON. He is essentially the BT1 WARGREYMON for the Black WARGREYMON strategy, because he is just a powerhouse card. Definitely A tier in my personal opinion. For subspecies of WARGREYMON from BT3 now, we have BlitzGreymon. I always find it funny that BlitzGreymons don't have Blitz as a keyword. Just even now in BT or EX4, it still doesn't have Blitz, so that's just funny to me. It evolved for 4, so it was very pricey. It could evolve from a black and a red, which was cool at the time, but it still cost 4, and you didn't even have things like Nokia or anything yet when this card came out, so it was very pricey. Like I said, you'd either have to, you didn't have memory boost either, so you'd have to use Gravity Crush to try to stay on turn unless your opponent gave you a ton of memory. But regardless, it had Piercing, which innately at the time was unique for the card in itself to have. That was a green archetype type thing. When Digivolving, it triggers D-Digivolve 2 on one of your opponent's Digimon, so of course you would trash 2 evolution sources from the top and go down. And then it becomes, if it became a level 3 Digimon, you couldn't trash anymore. But yeah, it just got power crept. Not too many people really play BlitzGreymon. I don't even think in the Ultra S deck people play this BlitzGreymon, they play the new one. But yeah, this is a low ranking subspecies of WARGREYMON cards in my personal opinion. Now we're in BT4, we have Yellow WARGREYMON. This was great in that particular meta. This WARGREYMON just decimated with the yellow archetype. It was a very popular card. Just the fact, it evolved for 3 off of a yellow Digimon. It didn't really play in a Greymon tribal deck because there weren't really any yellow Greymons outside of like Geo Greymon, which I'm not even sure if that existed in BT4. I know, actually it did. It did exist in that time frame. You got Shine Greymon and things like that. So you could theoretically play this with the Marcus Agumon line, which some people did, but it usually was paired with other yellow decks that weren't really Greymon oriented, but it was definitely made for a good finisher, because when attacking once per turn, you can add the top card of your security stack to your hand to unsuspend it, and when you attack, you can have one of your opponent's Digimon get minus 6,000 DP, so you'd be reducing their DP with other inheritables underneath or other option cards, so it would kill Digimon on the field swing, and then give that card back from security back to your hand, and restand it and swing, usually for game, or to help close out with something else you had on the field. So this is still a very quality WARGREYMON. Definitely in the mid-range of the tier list, but it's still a good card, and I still can see uses for it even in Shine Greymon decks of BT12 and EX4 today. Still in the BT4 meta, we have Victory Greymon, which is a subspecies of WARGREYMON. Actually, my favorite subspecies of WARGREYMon. He is really cool looking. It just sucks that his cards aren't that great. So Victory Greymon from BT4 had a 1 Digivolving. You could Digiburst 2, Evolution Switch underneath to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 8,000 DP or less. It just wasn't that good. You could, you know, if depending on that time frame, if you needed to get something off the field that was going to swing for game, you could do that. But it still cost 4 off of the level 5, which sucked. And as I mentioned prior, that you didn't have ways to circumvent that memory, so you usually would cross turn unless you had like a Gravity Crush. And again, if someone gave you some extra memory to utilize. But yeah, Victory Greymon, especially at this time, just wasn't good. Alt Art's nice from Maria, but outside of that, this card is very low on the tier list. So now in the BT5 meta, I'm going to lump these two together. We have the BT5 WARGREYMON and the BT5 Black WARGREYMON. They, pretty bad cards. I mean, this one kind of works a little better than this one because it does have Secret Attack +1, and it does have Reboot, so in the same way, it can be kind of seen in comparison with the BT2 WARGREYMON Black, but it just didn't do enough, and it was too expensive. It cost 4 to evolve, and we didn't even have Black Memory Boots or anything at the time when this came out. You did have Nokia, which potentially reduced the cost, so I could see the niche play of that, but it just wasn't that great when you had the promo Black WARGREYMON, which was a much better Black WARGREYMON to utilize. And then you had this WARGREYMON, which does see some niche play in WARGREYMON decks, Ragnarlord and things like that, because when attacking, it's inheritable. It's one of the only, I think it's the only WARGREYMON that has like an inheritable underneath. When attacking, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 3,000 DP or less, which is cool if you wanted to get rid of like a memory blocker or something that was on the field that was little. As a 1 Digivolving effect, if it has Greymon in its evolution sources, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with blocker. So it was the EX1 WARGREYMON in a sense before they kind of figured out what they wanted to do with that card. It's okay, but both of these still hang pretty low on the tier list for the WARGREYMON archetype. Now we're in the EX1 meta. It came out the whole the reign of Gabumon and everything. You have WARGREYMON here that introduced its Blitz mechanic for the Greymon archetype outside of Zeeg Greymon from BT5, but I don't count Zeeg Greymon. He doesn't exist to me. But anyways, this classic art from Hyper Coliseum WARGREYMON has a 1 Digivolving, of course, Blitz, meaning if you cross over memory, you can still attack. And when attacking, if you have a Tamer in play, when you attack a player directly so you have to swing at security, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with blocker. So that comes up in useful situations. It was actually pretty good in the Examon matchup if they weren't expecting it, or if they had a blocker that just wasn't, you just wanted to cross over turn. Because more times than not, you might not have had the memory to stay on turn. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to evolve right up into this WARGREYMON. And it was great for utility for whenever you want to BT9 meta, say if to X anybody underneath, swing with this WARGREYMON and activate the X anybody. So first you delete the blocker, get a Tamer, and then you evolve into the WARGREYMON X for its cost, and then blow up something up at the end. So this WARGREYMON has good utility, but it's still mid-range in my opinion. It just got power crept by better cards. A low-hanging fruit in the WARGREYMON card archetype is the promo WARGREYMON from BT7. It has a 1 Digivolving effect. If you have a Tamer in play, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less, which, if you're playing it in the BT12 EX4 meta, you could pop a Quartzmon or something like that, or even a level 7 that was on the field. So that's not too bad, but it's very situational, and that's kind of all it does, because when attacking, you can also delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 4,000 DP or less, which is, niche too. You need to get rid of that, but so many other cards can get rid of small bodies that this card, especially being for 4, was rough. Even at the time, no one really played Greymon Tribal too much at the time. Even now, they're just better WARGREYMONs to play instead of this one, but maybe as a one-off tech, I could see it being utilized if the meta got very hot, facing a lot of problematic things that are above 13k, like I said, I mentioned Quartzmon and things like that. So I can understand using this as a tech, but you wouldn't base your whole level 6 lineup around this particular WARGREYMON. So for that reason, I will definitely keep it in the low end of the tier list. Now in the BT8 meta, we have Black WARGREYMON. This card was hyped up like crazy when it was coming out. And even, today in a Greymon toolbox that can BT12EX4 and into the future, this Black WARGREYMON still sees play. Definitely a high-ranking card. It evolves from a level 5 red or black. It has the effect of when digivolving. If it has a red evolution source in its set, it can pop Digimon. If it has a black, it can pop Tamers. And of course, if it has both, it can pop Tamers and Digimon up to a play cost of 6. So hunters and decks like that always have a hard time when they face something like a Black WARGREYMON being evolved on the field. It has the all turns effect of once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, you can unsuspend him. So when he was paired with the BT8 Metal Greymon underneath, he would swing at the unsuspended Digimon. As it was deleted, he would restand himself up. Or even if you have the BT11 Metal Greymon and you were on your opponent's turn, he was a blocker and he blocked because the Digimon was deleted, he could restand and then activate the BT11 effect to trash your opponent's security. So he has really cool usage in the Greymon tribal archetype and toolbox, things like that. So this Black WARGREYMON definitely is a high-ranking Greymon in the tier list. Next up, we have BT9, everyone's favorite meta. X Anybody and Cool Boy, gotta love him. WARGREYMON X Anybody came out at this time. He evolved for 1 off of a WARGREYMon, or 4 off of a red level 5, so you usually go off of your Metal Greymon X from that set into this WARGREYMon. His effect all turns. If a card is removed from your opponent's security stack, you gain 1 memory. So whenever you swing OTK style, pair, especially if you had the BT1 WARGREYMon underneath, you have that extra security check, so you could OTK with this card, and then of course Omni for gain. And then you would gain back the memory for each security you checked. He was a little risky if you went from BT1 into him and you didn't have, say, the right protection with Greymon X's or Delicate Plan underneath. But if you popped off, because at the end of attack, if WARGREYMON with X Anybody option card was underneath its evolution stack, you could delete one of your opponent's Digimon with DP less than or equal to this Digimon. And during the BT9, BT10 meta and things like that, it would usually be around 17k. So it could delete any Digimon that was on the field if they didn't have protection. It's just a powerful card. Still sees play in the WARGREYMON archetype. Definitely high-ranking A tier list for this particular WARGREYMON. One of my favorites, hands down. Also from BT9, we got Gaiomon, who is a subspecies of Black WARGREYMON. He's kind of an upgrade. He was originally supposed to be Black WARGREYMON X, but Osmaria liked the design so much he kept it as its own Digimon. He counts as Greymon in name, so anything that benefits from having Greymon in its name, it does get as well. This card does everything. It's definitely an A-class card. It evolves for 5, but it has Blitz, so paying that memory doesn't matter. And even in the meta now, you can always just spend your BT12 ties to reduce the cost. In the toolbox method, it has Security Attack +1 innately, it has Reboot innately. And when digivolving, if you have a black Digivolution source underneath, you de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon, and if it has red, it has Blitz. So more times than not in this archetype, you're always going to have red and black sources, so you'll get Blitz, de-digivolve at the same time, Security Attack +1, and then when you're done that, you reboot. And when paired with the BT11 Metal Greymon, when you reboot, you trash one of your opponent's security on your opponent's turn. So this card just does everything. It's a great subspecies of the WARGREYMON archetype. Fantastic A-class tier card. Then in BT11, we got Black WARGREYMON X Anybody. It evolves for 2 off of Black WARGREYMON, so if you go off of your BT8 or even your promo Black WARGREYMON. It evolves for 5 from a black and red, but more times than not, you're gonna have the X Anybody underneath your Metal Greymon and swing and evolve up into this passing turn. It had Reboot, just like Gaiomon. It had the effect of the opponent's turn. When opponent's Digimon with the highest DP attacks, you can switch the target with him. So he becomes a pseudo blocker in that regard, so you just send that card. And it would pair well because its other effect, as long as it had Black WARGREYMON or the X Anybody and its evolution source, the moment it rebooted on your opponent's turn, it would delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost, so then it pops something on their field. And if they only had one strong thing on the field with no protection, that got popped. Whenever they push that, Erasin would have to attack this thing, you could trigger it. This card is just a powerful utility piece, still used in the Greymon toolbox style of BT12 and EX4. So this card is definitely high-ranking A-class card. Next up, we are in the BT12 meta. We have arguably the best WARGREYMON card that's been printed. We have this guy here. He digivolves for 3 from a level 5 with Metal Greymon in its name. So it could be a red Metal Greymon. Usually it's Metal Greymon X or even Metal Greymon normally, but with BT12 when it came out. or it can evolve for 4 from a black level 5, but people don't usually utilize that. They go straight from the Metal Greymon into this amazing WARGREYMON. I'm just gonna straight up say he's definitely top tier A class WARGREYMON, probably the best one paired alongside with Bt1 WARGREYMON. Probably number 1 in all honesty. This WARGREYMON, when digivolving until the end of your opponent's turn, it gets extra 3000 DP and gains reboot. So when it digivolves, gains that boost and can turn itself back up. It has raid, so when you swing at your opponent's security, you can redirect and shift to your opponent's highest DP unsuspended Digimon. And all turns, whenever attack target is switched, you can unsuspend them. So combo, of course, was always swing security, go towards an unsuspended Digimon, turn back up. It would have piercing from the Bt12 Metal Greymon, pierce right through, because he has high DP boosted up. Usually with the Metal Greymon X, it would gain another 3000, so it would be 18k, and if you have the Bt12 ties, he'd be up to like 20, 21, 22k. Just the biggest thing on the field, piercing through, checking for, sometimes 2, 3 checks, depending on if he has security plus Greymon and is inheritable, or you have Bt1 tie on the field. So he's a powerhouse card, and then of course when he reboots, if you have Bt12 tie, he has blocker that can double block, so when he blocks, since the attack target was switched, he would turn himself back up. So this card is phenomenal, top of the class for WARGREYMON cards. Everything else has to meet this standard when it comes to being a proper WARGREYMON to build your top end around. Now in the EX4 meta, we have this new Victory Greymon. It took many sets to get a new version of Victory Greymon. As I mentioned, this is one of my favorite WARGREYMON subspecies, but it sucks that this card just doesn't do enough. So it costs 4 still from a level 5 red, but with things like the Bt12 tie, you can reduce the cost if you wanted to go this route with Victory Greymon. It doesn't really stand on its own as its own card. It's kind of a tech choice if you wanted to use it. Because when digivolving, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less, and for every Digimon your opponent has on in play, you can add 2000 to the maximum of this DP-based deletion. So if they go wide like a Bloom Lord, you can pop something that could potentially be up to like a level 6 mega level. And all turns has the effect of when an opponent's Digimon is deleted once per turn, if you have a tamer in play, like your tie, or whatever it may be, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the highest DP. So you can pop the highest DP that's already on the field when opponent's Digimon is deleted. So let's say you popped at 6000 on the field, because I was popping at a tamer, you pop another thing that's on the field. So he's good for wide boards, I would say. So he's much better than the old Victory Greymon, but still not strong enough to stand alone, I feel, on his own without some utility pieces. And that's an alternate effect. So on your opponent's side, if they swing and they hit something in security and die, then this effect will trigger as long as you have the tamer to pop their Digimon with the highest DP. So it's pretty cool. It's good, as mentioned, like with the meta goes wide for certain things as a tech choice to slide in a Victory Greymon. So for that reason, I'd say he's more mid-range in the tier list. But he's still look cool, and the artwork, it looks amazing. It's the same artwork, the same artist that did the Bt12 alt art for WARGREYMON. So these two just look, really cool together, and Dragonkin brothers in a sense. So I love Victory Greymon. Just wish it was better. Also from EX4, we have the new Blitz Greymon that works for the Alter S strategy. It still has the same D-Digivolve effect as the Blitz Greymon from metas prior, but that D-Digivolve is 1/3, so 3 of your opponent's Digimon, so on their field you can just drop 3 of them down. You do that as an alternative effect. It evolves for 3 from Metal Greymon, and just like its old counterpart, it evolves for 4 from a black level 5 or a red level 5. And it has the niche effects that works with the Crest Garurumon archetype of evolving your other stack that's on the field up into a Garurumon. It's level 6 or lower. Or you could choose the effect of being able to DNA Digivolve this with another that's on the field for its cost. So you could go into like Alter S, Alter B, or even Ragnarlord if you go that way. And it has a when attacking inheritable effect that once per turn, if this Digimon has Omnimon in its name, you can trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. So if you go Blitz Omni, or if you're Alter S swinging, this will activate and trigger you to trash one of your opponent's security. And I do believe that it is the only other Greymon level 6 outside of WARGREYMON and maybe Zeke Greymon that has an inheritable underneath on that level. So that's kind of interesting. But this card, it's okay. It doesn't do enough on its own. It just kind of only works in its niche deck. But the D-Digivolve is cool, but you have so many D-Digivolve mechanics with like Gaiomon or the BT8 Metal Greymon, that just having that alone in your deck isn't enough in my opinion. Lastly, from EX4, we got a new Gaiomon that works hand in hand with this Gaiomon. It evolves for 4. It has this card's also treated as Greymon just like the other one. When digivolving, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 13 or more, so you can pop like the high level 6s or 7s that are on the field for 4th spawn. If no Digimon was deleted by this effect, you trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. And then at the end of your turn, if you have a Tamer in play, Digimon may evolve into one card with Gaiomon, so it would be this one, for its play cost, with a play cost of 13 or more, which this one does have, ignoring its Digifusion requirements and without paying the cost. So you would pop something on the field or trash something from security, and then immediately then turn evolve into this Gaiomon, which would then, because it has all the benefits from having that Gaiomon underneath, to get security attack +1, de-digivolve something, and blitz. So they just work hand in hand together. But if you're playing a deck without this Gaiomon, this card doesn't do enough, in my opinion. So that's why I would say it's mid-range to lower tier on the Greymon archetype tier list.
Next, we do have starter deck 15 WARGREYMON Ace. He counts as WARGREYMON in name. He has blast counter ability of being able to evolve off your level 5 Greymon in name for the cost of 3 if you were to evolve naturally, and if they were on your opponent's side attack, you can evolve up into this off your level 5 Greymon in name for free. Counter blast, it's a blocker. All turns, once per turn, a card is removed from your security stack, you may unsuspend this Digimon. And if this card is removed from play, you overflow and lose 4 memory. This card is kind of mid. Everyone kind of knows it. It works good in, some black-based decks. It has its niche ability. But because of being mono black, it can't evolve up into Omnimon to end game, which is unfortunate. And basically for what it offers, it has much better counterparts that you would want to utilize if you're going just with pure WARGREYMON cards. So for that reason, this card is, the artwork is pretty fire. It's okay. If you were making like a more casual kind of build, I could see you using this WARGREYMON. But as far as the other cards go, it's just kind of in the mid category. Next, we have Bt14 WARGREYMON that came out in the Blast Ace set. It's actually a pretty fine WARGREYMON. It's in the higher topping list. It has its niche ability of evolving from level 5 from a Greymon in names. And if you have an Agumon in play and a Tai Kamiya in play, and your opponent has a 10,000 DP Digimon, you can warp that Agumon up into this WARGREYMON. And when digivolving, it gains Raid for the turn, and it may attack, so it has Pseudo Blitz, meaning it can attack even if you cross over memory. And if you have a Tamer in play, which ideally would, it gains Security Attack +1 and Piercing, so you can get multiple OTK swings with this WARGREYMON, and he pairs amazing with WARGREYMON X from BT9. For that reason, I'd say he's definitely A tier. As far as WARGREYMON personally, BT12 WARGREYMON is my favorite. This one is probably second, followed by BT1 WARGREYMON in more contemporary terms. It's just a very nice WARGREYMON to utilize. He does have his drawbacks because he doesn't reboot or anything like that, so when you use him, you have to make sure you get the most value out of him. He does put a lot of pressure on your opponent, which is pretty nasty when you need it to, but I feel like in most standard WARGREYMON builds, him as a 1 or 2 of is usually the main go-to, with BT12 WARGREYMON being your focal boss monster, and BT9 WARGREYMON X being your counterpart. But yeah, it's a fine WARGREYMON, and it suits the whole category of WARGREYMON archetype cards very nicely.
And lastly, we have the upcoming Bt17 WARGREYMON that pairs with the Omnimon Turbo deck from the Secret Crisis set. It has an on-play when digivolving effect of deleting either an opponent's Digimon with 8,000 DP, or one of your Gabumons may evolve into a Metal Gabumon in your hand, ignoring its requirements. It also has the inheritable ability of when attacking, so when it's usually up into an Omnimon, of being able to trash one of your opponent's security mid-attack. So it's good if you need the OTK with one last little swing. This card is okay. It works probably good in the Turbo deck. In main WARGREYMON, it's going to probably a little more mid because you have better WARGREYMONs to play.
So there you have it. As of right now, these are the main WARGREYMONs and subspecies variants that are in the Digimon TCG. Hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown of the cards from yesteryear and contemporary terms. Thank you all for watching. Sound off in the comments what you thought of the video. And until next time, take care. Later.